The temperature in my office dropped 3 degrees the moment he smiled. And I knew 2 things. My promotion was in danger, and he wasn't human. He didn't knock. He didn't even pause. The door eased open with an obedient sigh, and a man in a charcoal suit walked in like the floor had been rolled out for him. All glass and river and cold light framed him, New York glittering behind his shoulders. He stopped at the edge of my desk, claiming exactly the amount of space that meant this is mine now without saying a word. "I'm not here to take your job," he said. I didn't look up from my laptop. I refused. I read the same sentence 3 times, VP Strategy internal shortlist this Friday, and finally let my eyes climb. His smile was surgical, his gaze, like someone switching off lights in a crowded room. "Then why are you always in my office?" I asked. "Maybe I like the view." It wasn't my face he meant, but the timing made my pulse jump anyway. Outside the glass wall, the executive corridor moved in muffled slow motion, heels whispering on carpet, a low murmur of voices. Inside my office, the desk lamp dimmed by a fraction, just enough, to make the screen's reflection sharpen like a second pair of eyes. I closed the laptop. "Darius, is it?" The CEO's new favorite. He gave me a graceful half-bow as if he'd been born rehearsing it. "Advisor. Temporary. Vespera Labs doesn't do temporary. We do until it's yours." I folded my arms. "Why are you here?" "To help," he said, and made help sound like an interesting brand of trouble. "I review strategic projects. I stress-test leadership. So you poke, prod, and smile while people tie themselves in knots to impress you. You say that like it's a bad thing." The lamp flickered, a heartbeat of shadow. My ears rang, soft, like the moment before an elevator stops. He watched me feel it, and his smile shifted from polite to amused. I hate that kind of smile. It lands exactly where I keep my composure. "I have a presentation in an hour," I said, "and 100 hours of work in this file, and a promotion to win. So if you're here to radiate at me, do it outside." He leaned a hip onto the corner of my desk, the precise corner where I stacked my color-coded briefs, the sacred corner, and set one fingertip on a folder. "You run tight ships, Lena. Ships don't sink when they're tight, and yet they do when someone drills a hole." His gaze slid toward the corridor where my not-friend Jason floated past, pretending not to look in. "Pretty slides he's been making." I felt the heat crawl up my neck. "They're mine." "Of course," Darius said. "He only borrowed them." "Out of admiration. Borrowing requires consent." "Not in this building," he said softly. "Not at your level." Then, lighter, "You hold the line. That means you know what you're fighting for." The ringing in my ears faded. "You're not here to take my job," I repeated. "You're here to watch if I drop it. To see if you carry it," he corrected. "By the way, your badge access." He reached for my phone as if he already owned my gravity. I snatched it first and clicked open the facilities app. "My office is keyed to me only." I said it that way after Mr. Grant retired from micromanaging and graduated to haunting. I tapped Evict Guest and selected Darius Advisor. The app chirped. "User is a permanent resident of Zone L-27. I blinked. Tried again. Same chirp. He looked delighted. "Permanent?" I said. "Who signed off on?" The glass door slid wider and the CEO himself strode by, phone on ear, gaze piercing forward. He lifted a finger in a distracted hello. "Darius, good. Sit with Lena today. She's our lead on the autonomous supply pilot." Then he was gone, a comet leaving leadership dust. I breathed out through my nose. "Congratulations. You live here now. I paid for the view," Darius said. With charm, with someone else's signature. I reopened my laptop, partly to hide a smile. The man was infuriating, but even my annoyance knew how to laugh. He watched me type. I could feel it, the weight of a gaze calibrated perfectly to be felt. It didn't leer or hover, it pressed just enough to ask a question. "Are you certain?" And the room listened. The vent hum lowered. The city outside dimmed and then brightened in one crystalline shift, like a lens being cleaned. "Is there a reason the lights obey you?" I asked. "Or is this the part where I call IT? Power systems are sensitive," he said. "So are people. Is that in your deck? People. Sensitive?" Slide 2. He tapped the folder he'd touched before. "You buried your best metric on page 19. I stiffened. You looked? From over here. His mouth tilted. Not humanly possible, I know. It wasn't possible. But then again, the room had gone briefly soundless when he walked in, as if something tasted the air and decided it belonged to him. I pushed back my chair and stood, smoothing my jacket. We're done. He didn't move. We'd arrived at the part of the dance where someone yields or someone changes the music. I stepped around the desk, shoe to carpet, heartbeat to the elevator's distant chime. Out, I said, and leaned past him to the control panel by the door. I keyed the lock, then keyed it again, then for good measure hit sweep guests. No guests detected. The panel chirped. Of course. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Fine. If you're staying, you're quiet. I can be silent, he said. But it won't help you. Try me. He didn't, of course. He followed me to the whiteboard like a shadow with opinions. When I wrote pilot KPI, lead time in 27%, the marker stuttered when he took it from my hand, without touching my fingers yet somehow touching. Ink spilled smooth as honey. I stole it back. Across the glass, Clara from PR glided by, perfume first, curiosity close behind. She tapped her phone with a smile sharp enough to cut ribbon. Rumor moves fastest wearing lipstick. 2 minutes later, Mr. Grant's name popped up on my screen, offering friendly advice about tempering expectations for Friday's shortlist. I deleted the message and told the part of my stomach that liked to clench that it could unclench later. Honesty doesn't win wars here, Darius said, as if reading the clench. Not alone. Then it's a good thing this isn't a war, I said. It's a promotion. He considered me for a long second that felt like a step closer. You're too honest for this place, he concluded, sounding almost appreciative. The corridor outside inhaled, footsteps hastened, doors shut. The lamp softened again. He lowered his voice. You'll be presenting to the board soon enough. They enjoy blood. I'm fresh out, I said. But I have data. He smiled like I'd said something flirtatious. Maybe I had in a language I only spoke when cornered. We worked in parallel for 5 quiet minutes. His quiet, which is to say, the building behaved, and I let the rhythm of my own competence return. When he finally pushed off my desk, he did it without leaving a smudge. At the door, he paused. The light held its breath. Don't fear the dark, he said, the words threading warm against my spine, a whisper placed exactly where doubt lives. It frightens those who see nothing in themselves. The hair on my arms rose. I hated that the line landed exactly where it was aimed. Get out of my office, Darius. He stepped into the corridor, the hush broke, and the world remembered its noise. He looked back once, eyes reflecting a slice of river. See you at the view, Lena. When the door sighed shut, the temperature drifted up again. I exhaled, opened the shortlist email, and told myself I wasn't shaking. I was, but only a little, and not just because of him. The glass wall of the conference room reflected my own expression back. At me, composed, professional, maybe even smug if you squinted. Inside, a dozen executives shuffled their notes. The projector hummed. And Jason, smiley sticker Jason, stood at the front with my slides. Not just similar slides, my slides. Same color palette, same structure, even the joke headline I'd added at 2 a.m. to keep myself from crying into the data, supply chain but make it sexy. He'd only shifted the order, smoothed the edges, like rearranging stolen jewelry in a new box. I felt heat crawl across my cheeks, then down my throat. My fingertips were ice on the table, gripping the pen so hard the plastic bit into skin. Metallic tang, back of my tongue. Betrayal has a flavor. Jason beamed at the board. By leveraging predictive analytics, we project a 27% reduction in lead times. He clicked the remote, my remote, onto the next slide. Our competitors aren't thinking this far ahead. That's why my team believes this is the future of Vespera Labs. My team. My metrics. My midnight drafts. For one split second, I expected someone, anyone, to turn toward me, eyes narrowing, mouths forming. Isn't this Lena's? But the silence stretched. Heads nodded. Notes scribbled. The projector light washed the room in complacency. Only one person watched me. Darius, 2 seats down, reclined like he'd ordered the whole performance. Not a word, not a move, just his gaze, a weight I felt down my spine. He wanted to see what I would do. I did nothing. Because what could I do? Shout thief in front of the CEO and half the board without proof? Honesty doesn't win in rooms like this. I'd always told myself it did, but watching Jason ride my work like a rented horse, I realized maybe I'd been naive. When the meeting ended, applause feathered politely against Jason's stolen brilliance. He grinned, shook hands, gathered his laptop like a conquering hero. My pen cracked in my palm. I hadn't realized I was still clenching it. Outside, the corridor swallowed me with its muffled hush. My pulse was too loud in my ears. I veered left, down the side hall to the kitchen nook. Coffee. I needed the ritual, the hiss and pour, the tiny illusion of control. The machine stared back with its array of glowing buttons. I jabbed one. Too hard. Again. The thing wheezed and then sputtered like it wanted to cry with me. Hot foam gushed over the lip of the cup, hissing onto the counter. Perfect. I grabbed napkins, muttering through my teeth. A hand appeared, sliding a crisp white napkin across the spill, his hand. Of course. You're too honest for this place, Darius said conversationally. Like we were discussing weather. Honesty doesn't win wars. I balled the napkin, resisted the urge to throw it at him. You enjoyed that circus in there. I observed, he corrected. Different verb. You could have said something. And confirm your weakness to the board? That wouldn't help you. He leaned on the counter, sleeves uncreased, tie dark and precise. I wanted to see if you'd bite. Bite? My laugh was a blade. I nearly choked. You stayed silent. His eyes flicked to the door Jason had just swaggered through. That unsettled him more than shouting would have. I blinked. Jason had in fact looked oddly jumpy during his final slide, tugging at his tie, voice catching for half a beat. I'd thought it was stage nerves, but maybe it was the way Darius watched him, like a cat watching a mouse that pretends it isn't cornered. You do something to him? I asked before I could stop myself. Darius smiled, the kind of smile that folds secrets into origami. People reveal themselves when the air changes. I simply changed the air. The lamp above the counter flickered. Just once. Enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. I told myself it was faulty wiring, because the alternative was entertaining an idea I wasn't ready for. I scrubbed the counter harder than necessary. Well, congratulations. You've proven I'm not ruthless enough for this office. Not yet, he said. But you'll learn. Or you'll lose. He tilted his head. What do you want, Lena? The title? Or the fight? I met his eyes, refusing to look away. Both. For the first time since he'd walked into my life, Darius actually laughed. Low, rich, dangerous. Like a sound the walls leaned in to hear. Then he stepped back, letting me breathe. When he left, Jason's laugh drifted from the hall, too loud, too forced. I clutched my coffee, half foam, half mess, and whispered to no one, "This isn't over." And it wasn't. The email came at 7:12 a.m. Subject line cold and unflinching, strategic pilot, joint leadership assignment. When I opened it, my stomach performed an Olympic dive. Effective immediately, Lena Han and Darius Vale will co-lead the autonomous supply chain pilot. Deliverables due, 6 weeks. Status updates, weekly board review. Outcome, promotion consideration. Translation, play nice, or both of you burn. By 8, I was in the war room. A glass box lined with whiteboards, sticky notes, and timelines like a crime investigation. My bagel went untouched. My jaw, however, got a workout clenching as Darius strolled in, latte in hand. Expression like the CEO had written him a love letter instead of a death pact. Co-lead, I said flatly. As in equals. As in partners, he countered. He set his cup down without leaving a ring, of course. You're glaring, that's good. Means you care. I care about winning, I snapped, flipping open my binder. You care about, what, brooding theatrically? He smiled like it was a compliment. Brooding is free. Losing is not. The brainstorm began like any other corporate sparring match. Sticky notes flying, markers squeaking. I wrote risk mitigation in fat blue letters across the board. We build incremental models, I argued. Test small, scale once it's bulletproof. That way we avoid reputational blowback if anything goes wrong. Safe, he said, lounging against the glass. And slow. Slow is how you avoid lawsuits. Fast is how you avoid irrelevance. He crossed to the opposite board and scrawled full deployment in decisive black strokes. His handwriting had the audacity to look cinematic. You'd gamble the entire project on untested models? He tapped the marker. I'd gamble on people's hunger to believe. Give them a vision, not a checklist. I laughed, sharp and incredulous. That's not strategy. That's manipulation. Strategy is manipulation. You just prefer softer words. I turned back to my board only to discover my marker had betrayed me. Dead. Nothing but pathetic squeaks. I shook it. Pressed harder. Nothing. Allow me. He plucked another marker from the tray, uncapped it with one elegant twist, and drew a perfect arrow across the glass, smooth, bold, unbroken. Then, because the universe adores humiliating me, he tested it on the actual glass wall, and it worked. Jet black clarity, like the glass had been waiting for his ink alone. Of course, I muttered, snatching it back. Your markers even obey you. His smirk said, obviously. I wrote with unnecessary force, nearly stabbing the glass. My letters came out jagged, but legible. Point for me. Later, we faced our first client pitch together, a mid-level exec named Harrington who exuded skepticism like cologne. He sat stiff in the client room, chin lifted, every question barbed. Why would Vespera Labs risk capital on automation when competitors are scaling back? He asked. His gaze was locked on me, daring me to trip. I launched into my polished answer about efficiency curves and predictive gains. He nodded, but the skepticism lingered, a shadow across his forehead. Then Darius spoke. Because fear is a story, Mr. Harrington, and Vespera doesn't buy fear. We sell confidence. The room shifted. It was subtle, like someone turned the dial on gravity. Harrington leaned forward, eyes sharpening with sudden interest. His pen stilled. For a moment, he looked like a man who'd just glimpsed a future he couldn't refuse. The hairs on my arms prickled. The air carried a faint electric hum, invisible but undeniable. My skin buzzed like I'd rubbed against static. When the meeting ended, Harrington shook both our hands, grip firmer than before. You've got my attention, he said, looking mostly at Darius. We walked out together. My pulse was still jittering. I began. Persuaded, he finished smoothly. No, you pushed him. I felt it. The air, something changed. He tilted his head, studying me like I was an equation. You're unusually perceptive. You're unusually terrifying. That earned a low laugh. I don't force people, Lena. I show them the version of themselves they most want to believe. They do the rest. I stopped in the hall, arms crossed. You call that influence. I call it pressure. Tomato. He leaned close enough that his voice curled into my ear. Tell me, did you hate it because it worked, or because you couldn't do it yourself? The worst part? I didn't know. Back in the war room, silence hung thick as we updated the timeline. My head still buzzed, not from caffeine. Darius wrote milestones in that same infuriatingly cinematic hand, each line neat, decisive. Vision sells, he said, almost gently. Data supports. Together they win. Alone, they limp. I set my marker down, forced myself to meet his gaze. You think I need you? His smile was a slow unfurling of certainty. I think you'll hate needing me. And that, Lena, is where the fun begins. I hated that he might be right. Corporate galas always smell like expensive perfume, over-polished floors, and desperation. The hotel ballroom glittered in gold. Chandeliers dripping crystals, champagne flutes chiming like wind chimes in a storm. Everyone smiled too wide, laughed too loud, and calculated silently how close they could orbit the CEO without burning. I'd chosen a sleek black dress that said promotion candidate more than +1. My heels pinched. My smile pinched harder. I didn't see Grant until he was already leaning in, his cologne heavy, his smirk heavier. Former boss, current parasite. You look radiant, Lena, he said, voice low, conspiratorial. It's a shame some people don't realize how much help you get with your projects. My stomach dropped, but my face didn't. Help? Oh, come now. Everyone knows no one builds something like that alone. People are talking. His breath brushed my ear. Word is, someone else writes the bones of your work. You just polish. Heat flared in my cheeks. Rage, humiliation, and the sour metallic taste of déjà vu. Jason's theft replayed in my mind, now weaponized by Grant. Before I could answer, Another voice slid in. Smooth as silk over a knife. Interesting rumor, Darius said. He appeared at my side like he'd been waiting for his cue. His champagne glass caught the chandelier light, sharp as a blade, particularly coming from a man whose files tend to carry other people's initials. Grant's smirk cracked. His eyes darted, just for a second. Enough. I let out a soft laugh, feigning ease. Sounds like projection, doesn't it? Grant excused himself with a brittle smile, retreating into the sea of sequins and tuxedos. You're welcome, Darius murmured, sipping his drink. I didn't ask for a rescue. No, he agreed, lips curving. But you needed one. Later, after a carefully rationed glass of wine, I found myself near the bar again. The music swelled, couples spun across the dance floor, a curated dream of partnerships that rarely existed outside hotel ballrooms. And then his hand was there, palm open, invitation clear. You play too many games, I said, arching a brow. I only choose partners who know the rhythm, Darius replied. Something reckless inside me answered before my brain could object. I let him lead me onto the floor. The waltz wasn't soft. It was a duel disguised as grace. His hand firm at my waist, mine pressing into his shoulder like I could shove him off tempo. He spun us through the glittering crowd, his smirk daring me to falter. You're enjoying this too much, I said through gritted teeth. You're the one keeping step, he countered, voice low, amused. You don't have to. Losing isn't an option. Exactly. Our eyes locked, challenge sparking, until the song ended and applause rose around us. Neither of us let go right away. I escaped to the balcony, lungs craving the cool night air. The city sprawled below, 1,000 glittering lights pretending to be stars. Wind tugged at my hair, carrying the faint pulse of bass from inside. You're running, Darius said behind me. His voice carried easily over the music, threaded with that quiet certainty I hated. Taking a break, I corrected, gripping the railing. He joined me, leaning one hand on the iron rail. Too close, too calm. You're angry at Grant. Of course I am. He's poisoning the room with lies. He's afraid. That's why his voice shakes when he spreads them. I turned to face him, exasperation cutting through the night. You notice every tremor, every weakness. That's what I do. His gaze caught mine, too sharp, too intent. And I notice yours. Silence stretched. The wind filled it, cool against my flushed cheeks. My heart thudded like it wanted to betray me next. This, whatever you're doing, it's dangerous, I said, my voice lower than I intended. He smiled, not denying it. Danger has rhythm too. I should have stepped back. I didn't. Neither did he. Our words fell into a pause that felt like gravity changing. And then his mouth brushed mine. Not tentative. Deliberate. Certain, heat sparking where we collided. It was a kiss that felt inevitable, like we'd been orbiting too close for too long. And it was wrong, utterly inappropriate, completely unprofessional. So why did it feel so right? I broke away first, breath sharp. His eyes were unreadable, shadows and fire both. And right then, an overburdened waiter crashed through the balcony doors, tray tipping. Glasses shattered in a dramatic chorus. Perfect timing. We both stepped back, straightening like guilty students. I smoothed my dress, he adjusted his cuff. Nothing happened, I said quickly. Of course not, he agreed. His lips curved just enough to undo my denial. Inside, the music swelled again, pretending the night was simple. Out here, nothing was simple anymore. The compliance floor never tried to be welcoming. Cold neon hummed above narrow aisles stacked with paper archives and digital kiosks. The air smelled like dust and disinfectant. The kind of place where mistakes weren't corrected. They were preserved, cataloged, weaponized. I was there because an email landed in my inbox that morning, urgent. Irregularities in project documentation. My project. The file packet waited in a gray folder on the counter, heavy as a verdict. I opened it, pulse already racing, and froze. Dates didn't line up. Approvals were missing. My name was on documents I hadn't touched. Memos with my signature copied so cleanly I almost believed them myself. If you didn't know better, it looked like I'd been cutting corners, forging authorizations, faking compliance. My throat went dry. I turned the pages again, hoping the lies would dissolve if I looked harder. They didn't. Behind me, paper rustled. Mr. Grant emerged from between shelves like a vulture stepping out of shadow, his smile precise, smug. "Rough morning?" he asked, voice syrupy. "Shame when paperwork doesn't match the story you tell upstairs." I tightened my grip on the folder. "You did this. Accusations are dangerous, Lena." He slid his hands into his pockets, rocking on his heels. "Especially when the evidence speaks louder than you ever could. Forged evidence. Perception doesn't care." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You want to climb, but you forget. Those ladders are fragile. All it takes is one crack." My chest burned with the urge to shout, to rip the smugness off his face. But rage in the compliance office was just another note for the record. I shut the folder hard enough to sting my palm and pushed past him. I found Darius waiting in the corridor, leaning against the wall like he'd known exactly when to appear. He studied my face, then the folder in my arms. "Well," he said lightly, "someone worked late last night." The elevator chimed at the end of the hall. I strode toward it, words boiling in my chest. He followed, unhurried, like a shadow that knew I couldn't outrun it. Inside the elevator, the doors slid shut. Silence wrapped us, broken only by the soft whir of descent. "You knew," I said, voice sharp enough to cut. His eyes flicked to mine. "Knew what?" "That Grant would come after me, that he'd try to sabotage the project." "I knew he'd try," Darius admitted, unflinching. "I didn't know how." The folder trembled in my hands. My heartbeat surged into my throat, uneven, wild. "You just watched? Waiting to see how deep he could cut me?" "I was waiting," he said evenly, "to see how you'd stop the bleeding." The words slammed into me harder than the forged documents. My knees felt unsteady, like the ground beneath me wasn't fixed. I pressed back against the cold elevator wall, needing the chill to anchor me. "You're supposed to be my partner on this," I whispered. "Instead I swallowed. "You let me walk straight into a knife." His gaze didn't soften. If anything, it sharpened. "If I remove every knife, you never learn where they aim. That's not partnership." My voice cracked. "That's cruelty." The elevator slowed. I turned away from him, refusing to let him see the tears burning at the corners of my eyes. My hands shook, the folder threatening to slip. The doors slid open. And there was Grant, waiting to step in, smug smile perfectly in place. Except the elevator mercifully had other plans. The doors shut smoothly right before he could cross the threshold. He blinked, caught mid-step. I blinked too, then glanced at Darius. He raised his brows, innocent as a saint. "Heavy traffic today. It should have been funny. It almost was. But the ache in my chest smothered the laugh. When the elevator carried us down, I realized I wasn't just retreating from Grant's sabotage. I was retreating from Darius too. From the way he spoke like pain was a lesson I was supposed to thank him for. For the first time, I wondered if I could keep standing this close to him without breaking. The PR floor always felt different from the rest of Vespera Labs, like stepping into a theater instead of an office. Walls plastered with mood boards, campaign slogans in neat fonts, color palettes pinned like butterflies. Giant digital boards tracked social media sentiment in real time, tiny graphs, twitching at every tweet, headlines flickering across the screens. I was already bracing myself when the notification hit my phone. A news alert: Vespera's reckless gamble, pilot project shows sloppy leadership. The article was neatly sourced, filled with leaked excerpts from a project brief, except they weren't my words. They were twisted, stripped of context, made to sound amateur. By the time I reached the media room, Clara was there, poised in front of the crisis table like she'd been waiting to star in this scene. Perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect smirk tucked just behind a mask of concern. "Oh, Lena." Her voice was honey over glass. "Rough morning? You leaked it." I didn't bother with pretense. The phrasing, those were my drafts. You clipped, rearranged. You made it sound incompetent. She widened her eyes with mock innocence. "That's a serious accusation. Maybe you should focus less on blaming me and more on damage control." My hands curled into fists. The screens above us replayed the headline in merciless loops. I could feel the room watching, the PR staff pausing their calls, their fingers hovering over keyboards. And then, of course, he was there. Darius entered the room without hurry, but the atmosphere shifted with him, a subtle hush like the air waiting for thunder. His eyes flicked once to Clara, then to me, and he said nothing. Not yet. Clara leaned forward, her smile sharpening. You know, Lena, the board hates bad press. They might start to wonder if you're really ready for leadership. But don't worry. She angled her gaze toward Darius, softening. Some people are better at carrying that weight. Her meaning was clear. She wasn't competing for the promotion. She was competing for him. My pulse roared in my ears. I wanted to shout, to throw every truth like a spear. Instead, I inhaled, steady but burning. You'll regret this, I told her, and walked out before the heat in my voice could crack into something weaker. Darius caught up to me in the corridor. His footsteps were too measured, his silence too heavy. When he finally spoke, his words landed like an executioner's blade. I don't save people, he said. They either burn or rise stronger. The cruelty was surgical, precise. It left me breathless. I stopped, turning to face him. You think this is a test? That every knife in my back is some lesson I should thank you for later? His expression didn't change, but his eyes stormed. If I shield you from every attack, you'll never learn to stand when the ground gives way. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. My knees trembled, not from weakness but from fury. Then hear me clearly, Darius. Stay out of my way. No more interventions, no more whispers. This is my fight, not yours. For the first time, he didn't argue. He simply inclined his head, a gesture that looked like obedience but felt like defiance. His silence pressed harder than words. The corridor stretched around us, suddenly too still. The digital boards at the end of the hall flickered once, then went silent. Phones cut mid-ring, screens frozen. For a breathless second, the entire floor seemed to exhale, soundless, as if the building itself listened to us. Then the hum returned. The boards lit up, calls resumed, chatter filled the space again. Normalcy snapped back, too sharp, too fast. I stood in the echo of that silence, chest heaving. The fight with Clara was only beginning, but the real fracture was here, between us. I walked away, folder clutched tight, pulse unsteady. For the first time since this began, I wasn't sure if Darius was my ally, or just another storm I'd have to survive. The office at night was a different creature. By day it was sharp edges, brisk footsteps, the low hum of competition. But at night, when the city stretched like a sea of fractured light beyond the glass, it became mine. The open floor gleamed under the ghost glow of monitors on standby. My lamp spilled a pool of warmth across the desk, the only oasis in a desert of dark. It was nearly midnight when I opened the archives and started digging. The folder Clara had poisoned was still fresh in my mind. Jason's stolen slides, Grant's forged approvals. One betrayal could be explained away. 3 was a pattern. And patterns left trails. I began with the version logs. Every file had a signature, a timestamp, a fingerprint that couldn't be hidden unless you were very clever. Jason wasn't clever, he was lazy. He left a trail of edits tagged to his account, right up to the moment my work became his. I copied everything, line by line. My fingers shook, not from fear this time, but from a rush I hadn't felt in months, control. In the small glass conference room I'd claimed as my war room, I spread papers across the table. Emails, drafts, timestamp screenshots, each one was a stone in a wall I was building between truth and the lies pressing in on me. At 2 a.m., the analyst from logistics, Raj, wandered past, coffee in hand. He blinked at me through the glass, then opened the door. You're still here? Apparently so. I gestured at the mountain of documents. Turns out betrayal requires late-night paperwork. He snorted, then stepped inside. Need a hand? I'm good with version histories. I hesitated. Asking for help felt like weakness. But Raj's eyes held none of Jason's hunger or Grant's condescension. Just curiosity, the kind born from loving puzzles. Fine, I said, sliding him a chair. Find me every instance where Jason touched these files. Time, date, duration. I want a clean chain. An hour later, we had it. Jason's fingerprints everywhere. By dawn, I looped in another unlikely ally, Marin, a compliance lawyer. With the warmth of an ice cube and the accuracy of a scalpel. She scanned the forged memos Grant had planted, her brow furrowed. Sloppy work, she said finally. The signatures don't match the log keys. He duplicated your initials, but the metadata's wrong. Anyone with eyes will see this was faked. Not everyone has eyes, I muttered. Some only have ears for rumors. Then make them see, Marin replied, sliding the pages back. I'll back your chain of custody. Document it, present it clean. Keep your temper out of it. That last line stung. But she was right. By the time the sun rose, my desk was littered with empty coffee cups. Number 6 trembled in my hand as I poured it, my wrist shaking so badly the stream nearly missed the mug. I laughed, the sound cracked but real. I swear it's not you, I muttered to the empty room. Then, glancing toward the door, I added, Okay, maybe 6% you. Only 6? The voice made me jump. Darius stood at the threshold, framed by the glow of the city behind him. His suit jacket was off, shirt sleeves rolled up, like even he had grown tired of perfection. He didn't enter, just leaned one hand on the doorframe, watching me like he always did, too intently. You're predictable, I said, covering my nerves with sarcasm. Show up just when I'm vulnerable. Show up when you're interesting, he corrected. His eyes flicked to the documents spread like a battle plan. You've built yourself an arsenal. Not yours, I shot back. Not your kind of arsenal. He tilted his head. You underestimate how much it costs to walk alone. And you underestimate, I said, meeting his gaze head-on, how much it costs to be yourself. Even when it terrifies you. For once, he had no ready retort. The silence between us was sharp, almost electric. The screens behind him flickered faintly, like they weren't sure whose side they were on. I turned back to the files. This is enough. Jason's theft, Grant's forgery, Clara's leaks, I can tie them all together. And when I walk into that boardroom, I won't need your tricks. His voice was softer now, a shadow against the hum of the city. Maybe. But tricks aren't always tricks. Sometimes they're truths people refuse to see. Then let them refuse. I closed the final folder, pressing my palm against its cover. My pulse steadied, a quiet drumbeat of certainty. I'll show them the truth anyway. Darius lingered a moment longer, as if he wanted to argue, or warn me, or maybe just stay. But finally he inclined his head in a gesture that was almost respectful. Then he was gone, footsteps fading into the silence of the floor. When the clock struck 7, I stacked everything into a single dossier. The evidence was clean, undeniable, elegant. Jason's edits, Grant's forgeries, Clara's manipulations, all mapped, dated, proven. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without flinching. This wasn't Darius's influence, bending people to his will. This wasn't fear or manipulation. This was me, my strength, my work, my proof. I looked out over the waking city, the sunrise painting glass towers in shades of fire. The board would see me soon enough. And when they did, they would see a woman no rumor could bend, no forged signature could erase. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It was something cleaner, victory. And this time, it would be mine. The boardroom of Vespera Labs had been designed to intimidate. A long table of black walnut stretched like a runway, flanked by chairs that could have doubled as thrones. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Manhattan, the skyline jagged against a pale morning sky. It wasn't a room built for comfort. It was a room built for verdicts. I sat at one end of the table, laptop open, presentation queued, dossier stacked beside me like an arsenal. My palms were cold, but the cold steadied me. Across the table, Jason was grinning too wide, Clara's lipstick-perfect smile poised like a blade, and Mr. Grant sat back in his chair, arms folded, the smugness of a man who thought he'd already won. Darius was there too, seated further down. For once, he didn't lounge or smirk. He was quiet, unreadable, a shadow that neither threatened nor protected. His silence unnerved me more than his words ever had. The CEO cleared his throat, and the room fell into hush. Let's begin. Lena, you're leading this session. Show us why your project deserves to carry the future of this company. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and launched into the pitch I'd rehearsed until it lived in my bones. Autonomous supply management is not just an experiment, I began, voice steady. It's a necessity. Our models reduce lead times by 27%, cut waste by 15%, and project scalability across 3 continents. The slides glowed behind me, clean graphs, crisp timelines, proof woven into every bullet point. But Jason wasn't about to let me keep the floor. He leaned forward, his tone dripping with false concern. Impressive numbers, Lena. But weren't some of these projections inconsistent? I've heard there are compliance gaps in your documentation. Clara chimed in sweetly, yes, and the media seems to have already noticed. Headlines call the leadership sloppy. It makes one wonder if this project has the stability required. Their words sliced through the air. The board shifted in their seats, murmuring. Doubt spread like ink in water. I felt the sting of heat in my cheeks, the old taste of metal at the back of my throat. Then I remembered the dossier, the hours of digging, the chain of truth I'd forged. Actually, I said, clicking to the next slide. Let's talk about consistency. The projector filled the wall with a simple screenshot, the version log of my original file. My name, stamped again and again, each edit recorded with date and time. Then, below it, Jason's edits. Copying, moving, rearranging. My work, traced line by line. Murmurs rose louder now, this time tinged with disapproval. Jason's smile faltered, the skin at his temple beating with sweat. And compliance, I continued, flipping to the next slide. Here is the metadata on the so-called irregular documents. I highlighted the mismatched signature keys, the cloned initials that didn't align with the system's embedded timestamps. In other words, fabricated. These weren't mistakes. They were sabotage. I felt the shift in the room, subtle but seismic. Suspicion moved from me to Grant. His jaw tightened, and for the first time he looked less like a master puppeteer and more like a man cornered. Finally, I said, my voice rising, the leaked brief in the press. Context matters. Clara removed key sections to misrepresent the project. Here's the full draft, with her tracked deletions. The silence that followed was thunderous. Cold still clung to my palms, but down my spine. Warmth spread, confidence, steady and certain. Jason stammered, This is a misunderstanding. No, the CEO cut in, his tone sharp. It's very clear. I let my gaze drift down the table, to Darius. He caught it, and then deliberately lowered his eyes. He wasn't saving me. He wasn't bending the room. This victory was mine alone. The CEO leaned forward, fingers steepled. Lena, you've not only presented a strong strategy but defended it with undeniable integrity. This board values truth, resilience, and leadership under fire. You've proven you have all three. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Effective immediately, you are promoted to Vice President of Strategic Development. For a moment, the room blurred. My pulse thundered in my ears. Relief, pride, and something close to disbelief cascaded through me. I forced myself not to smile too wide, not to cry, not to collapse from the release of weeks of tension. Jason slumped in his chair, Clara's perfect poise cracked at the edges. And Grant sat stone-faced, though the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. The meeting adjourned, chairs scraped back, voices rose, papers shuffled. I gathered my dossier with deliberate calm. As I walked toward the exit, Grant brushed past me, face thunderous. And then, as if the universe decided to offer me dessert with my main course, his elbow clipped the potted cactus that had decorated the entryway for years. The plant wobbled, then tipped. He caught it, but not before several needles lodged firmly in his sleeve. He hissed, jerking back. I leaned close enough for only him to hear. Karma likes minimalism. His glare could have curdled stone, but I walked on, head high, dossier clutched like a trophy. In the waiting area, I paused. The thin carpet muted footsteps, the city gleamed beyond the glass, and for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to smile. I hadn't needed Darius to bend the room. I hadn't needed his power at all. The strength had been mine from the beginning, buried under doubt, but mine. And now everyone in that boardroom knew it too. The executive floor had gone silent after the board meeting. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when papers are signed, verdicts delivered, futures decided. I stepped into the corridor, heels whispering against the carpet, the air cool and still, except for the soft hum of the vents. My new office waited at the far end, a corner space still smelling faintly of paint and varnished wood. And there he was. Darius leaned against the wall near the door like he belonged to this floor more than the architecture did. No smirk this time, no mocking tilt to his mouth. Just watching. I stopped a few feet away. You knew, I said quietly. He tilted his head. Knew what? That they'd come for me. That Jason, Grant, Clara, all of them would take their shots. I did, he admitted. His voice was calm, but not careless. I put shields where I could. redirected a few knives. But I didn't take them out of your path. Why? My arms folded, more out of habit than defense. Because then it wouldn't have been your victory, he said simply. It would have been mine. And you deserved better than that. The words landed softly, but something in my chest shifted, like gears finally aligning after grinding too long. You really think I couldn't have won on my own? I think you did win on your own. His eyes held mine steadily, maybe the first person in years to do it without ever asking for my hand. Something almost like a smile flickered across his face, small, self-mocking. Maybe that's why you're the only one my influence doesn't work on. Or maybe you're just the only one who keeps choosing not to give in. I didn't answer right away. My fingers traced the doorframe of the new office, the wood warm from sunlight streaming through the big windows. Finally, I said, if we're going to work together, really work together, there are rules. His brow lifted, curious. No tricks in my department, I said. No whispered manipulations, no bending people until they break. We have honest discussions. Always. For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. Then he inclined his head in something that almost looked like respect. Temptation is my specialty, he said. But consent is my rule. I exhaled slowly, tension loosening from my shoulders. We stepped inside the new office. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching on the fresh paint, the desk polished to a quiet shine. It was bigger than my old one, with a view that made the whole city look like it waited for instructions. You really like this office? I asked, glancing at him. His gaze drifted over the windows, the skyline, then back to me. I like the view. I raised a brow. The skyline? No. His mouth curved slightly. The view when you're standing in it. Heat touched the back of my neck before I could stop it. I moved behind the desk, resting a hand on the chair. This is my seat. My rules, my work. He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, relaxed but watching closely. For now, for always, I shot back, half smiling. He nodded once, like a man conceding only the battle, never the war. The sunlight stretched across the floor between us, and for the first time in what felt like months, I let myself breathe without the weight of defense. It wasn't a truce. Not exactly. It was the start of a team. Morning light poured into the new office, turning the glass walls into sheets of gold. Outside, the city was already awake. Horns, footsteps, the restless hum of ambition. Inside, it was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. I set my coffee on the desk and crossed to the windows. The skyline stretched wide, sharp, and endless. With one smooth pull, the blinds opened, sunlight flooding in until every shadow vanished. Behind me, voices murmured in the hallway. My team, already gathering, silhouettes passing behind the frosted glass. Meetings, deadlines, plans waiting to be built. And for just a heartbeat, in the reflection on the window, I saw him. Darius stood near the door, watching. Not with the sharpness he used on everyone else, but with something steadier, quieter. The sun hit his face, and for an instant, his eyes caught the light wrong. Not brown. Not black. A dark scatter of stars. Galaxies where pupils should be. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled at the glass. At him. At myself. Yes, I knew. The city outside roared to life. My team waited. The future waited. Power isn't what bends a room, it's what keeps you standing when it tries. And today, I choose to stand.